Hello everyone. Today we'll know the famous short story Karma written by Khushwant Singh. So let us know about Khushwant Singh. Khushwant Singh was born on 2nd February in 1915 and died 20th March 2014. He was a well-known novelist, short story writer, historian and journalist. He had his early education in Delhi. Later, he went to London, where he received his LLB from the London University and his bar at law from the Inner Temple. He started his career as a public relations officer in High Commission of India in London. Khushwant Singh's first collection of stories, The Mark of Vishnu, brought him immediate fame and he followed it up with two novels, Train to Pakistan in 1955 and I Shall Not Hear the Nightingale in 1958. He was also the author of comprehensive story history of Sikhs. Since 1969, he had been editor of the Illustrated Weekly of India. His stories his stories are bold, dramatic, vigorous, and witty. He writes in a style that is lucid, forthright, and refreshingly unpretentious. So, let us know about the Karma story. So, story Karma takes the reader back to the colonial pre independence India when many Western educated Indians prided themselves on their superior culture and behavior. In this story of Mr. Mohanlal, an Anglo person, he puts on airs about his Oxford background and perfect English accent only to be humiliated by a pair of ill educated, drunken, and uh, ill natured English soldiers who not only dislodge him from his reserved berth but first strike him on the face and then fling him out of the train. This traumatic experience shocks him into realizing his true identity. So let us read the story in detail. Sir Mohanlal looked at himself in the mirror of a first class waiting room at the railway station. The mirror was obviously made in India. The red oxide at its back had come off at several places, and long lines of translucent glass cut across its surface. Sir Mohan smiled at the mirror with an air of pity and patronage. You are so very much like everything else in this country, inefficient, dirty, indifferent, he murmured. The mirror smiled back at Sir Mohan. You are a bit of all right, old chap, it said. Distinguished, efficient, even handsome. That neatly trimmed moustache, the suit from Savile Row with the carnation in the buttonhole, the aroma of eau de cologne, talcum powder, and scented soap. All about you. Yes, old fellow, you are a bit of all right. Sir Mohan threw out his chest, smoothed his balliol tie for upteenth time and waved a goodbye to the mirror. He glanced at his watch. There was still time for a quick one. Koi hai? A bearer in white livery appeared through a wire gauge door. Ek chota, ordered Sir Mohan and sank into a large cane chair to drink and ruminate. Outside the waiting room, Sir Mohan Lal's luggage lay piled along the wall on a small grey steel trunk. Lakshmi, Lady Mohanlal, sat chewing a betel leaf and fanning herself with a newspaper. She was a short and fat and her middle 40s. She wore a dirty white sari with a red border. On one side of her nose glistened a diamond nose ring, and she had several gold bangles on her arms. She had been talking to the bearer until Sir Mohan had summoned him inside. As soon as he had gone, she hailed a passing railway coolie. Where does the Janana stop? Right at the end of the platform, the coolie flattened his turban to make a cushion, hoisted the steel trunk on his head, and moved down the platform. Lady Lal picked up her brass tiffin carrier and ambled along behind him. On the way, she stopped by Hawker's stall to replenish her silver betel leaf case and then joined the coolie. She sat down on a steel trunk which the coolie had put down and started talking to him. Are the trains very crowded on these lines? These days our trains are crowded, but you will find room in Janana. Then I might as well get over the bother of eating. Lady Lal opened the brass carrier and took out a bundle of cramped chapatis and some mango pickle. While she ate, the coolie sat opposite her on his haunches, drawing lines in the gravel with his fingers. Are you traveling alone, sister? No, I am with my master brother. He is in the waiting room. He travels first class. He is a vizier and a barrister and meets so many officers in Englishmen in the trains. And I am only a native woman. I can't understand English and I don't know their ways, so I keep to my Janana inter class. Lakshmi chatted away merrily. She was fond of a little gossip and had no one to talk to at home. Her husband never had any time to spare for her. She lived in upper story of the house and he on the ground floor. He did not like her poor illiterate relative hanging around his bungalow. So they never came. He came up to her once in a while at night and stayed for a few minutes. He just ordered her about in anglicized Hindustani and she obeyed passively. These nocturnal visits had, however, borne no fruit. The signal came down and the clanging of the bell announced the approaching train. Lady Lal hurriedly finished off her meal. She got up, still licking the stone of the pickled mango. She emitted a long, loud belch as she went to the public tap to rinse her mouth and wash her hands. After washing, she dried her mouth and hands with her loose end of her sari and walked back to her steel tongue, blinching and thanking the gods for favor of filling meal. The train steamed in. Lakshmi found herself facing in almost empty inter-class Janana compartment next to the guard's van at the tail end of the train. The rest of the train was packed. She heaved her squat, bulky frame through the door and found a seat by the window. She produced a 2 anna bit from a knot in her sari and dismissed the coolie. She then opened her beetle case and made herself 2 beetle leaves charged with red and white paste, minced betel nuts and cardamoms. These she thrust into her mouth till her cheeks bulged on both sides. Then she rested her chin on her hands and sat gazily idly at the jostling crowd on the platform. The arrival of the train did not disturb Sir Mohanlal sang for Freud. He continued to sip his scotch and ordered the bearer to tell him when he had moved the luggage to the first class compartment. Excitement, bustle, and hurry were exhibitions of bad breeding, and Sir Mohan was eminently well bred. He wanted everything ticky boo and order. In his 5 years old abroad, Sir Mohan had acquired the manners and attributes of the upper classes. He rarely spoke Hindustani. When he did it, it was like an Englishman's only way, the very necessary words and properly anglicized. But he fancied his English finished and refined at no less a place than the University of Oxford. He was fond of conversation and, like a cultural Englishman, he could talk on almost any subject: books, politics, people. How frequently had he heard English people say that he spoke like Englishmen? Sir Mohan wondered if he would be travelling alone. It was cantonment, and some English officers might be on the train. His heart warmed at prospect of an impressive conversation. He never showed any sign of eagerness to talk to the English as most Indians did, nor was he loud, aggressive, and opinionated like them. He went about his business with an expressionless matter of factness. He would retire to his corner by the window and get out of a copy of the Times. He would fold it in a way in which the name of the paper was visible to the others while he did it crossword puzzle. The Times always attracted attention. Someone would like to borrow it when he put it aside with a gesture signify I have finished with it. Perhaps someone would recognize his balliol tie with his which he always wore white while travelling. That would open a vista leading to a fairy land of Oxford colleges, masters, duns, tutors, boat races, and rugger matches. If both the Times and he tie failed, Sir Mohan would koi hai his bearer to get scotch out. Whiskey never failed with an Englishman. Then followed Sir Mohan's handsome gold cigarette cases filled with English cigarettes in India. How on earth did he get them? Sure, he didn't mind. And Sir Mohan's understanding smile. Of course, he didn't. But could he use the Englishman as a medium to commune with his dear old England? Those 5 years of greybacks, of gowns, of sports blazers and mixed doubles, of dinners at the inns, of courts and nights with Piccadilly prostitutes, 5 years of crowded, glorious life, worth for more than the 45 in India, with his dirty, vulgar countrymen, with the sordid details of road to success, of nocturnal visits to the upper story, and all too brief sexual acts with obese old Lakshmi, smelling of sweet and raw onions. Sir Mohan's thoughts were disturbed by the bearers announcing the installation of the Sahib's luggage in first class coupe next to the engine. Sir Mohan's walked to his coupe with a steady gait. He was dismayed. The compartment was empty. With a sigh, he sat down in a corner, opened the copy of the Times he had read several times before. Sir Mohan looked out of the window down the crowded platform. He face lit up as he saw two English soldiers struggling along, looking in all compartments for the room. They had their haversacks slung behind their backs and walked unsteadily. Sir Mohan decided to welcome them, even though they were entitled to travel only second class. He would speak to the guard. One of the soldiers came to the last compartment and stuck his face through the window. He surveyed the compartment and noticed the unoccupied berth. Before Will, he shouted, "One here." His companion came up, also looked in, and looked at Sir Mohan. "Get the nigger out," he muttered to his companion. They opened the door and turned to the half smiling, half protesting Sir Mohan. Reserved, yelled Bill. "Janta Reserved Army Fauj," exclaimed Jim, pointing to his khaki shirt. "Ekdam jao, get out." I say, surely, protested Sir Mohan in his Oxford accent. The soldiers paused. It almost sounded like English, but they knew better than to trust their inebriated ears. The engine whistled and the guard waved his green flag. They picked up the Sir Mohan's suitcase and flung it on to the platform, then followed here his thermos flask, briefcase, bedding, and the Times. Sir Mohan was livid with rage. Preposterous, he shouted, hoarse with anger. "I will have you arrested. Guard. Bill and Jim paused again. It did sound like English, but it was too much of the king's for them. "Keep your ready mouth shut," and Jim struck Sir Mohan flat on the face. The engine gave another short whistle, and the train began to move. The soldiers caught Sir Mohan by the arms and flung him out of the train. He kneeled backwards, tripped on his beddings, and landed on the suitcase. Toddaloo. Sir Mohan's feet were glued to the earth and he lost his speech. He stared at the lighted windows of the train going past him in quickening tempo. His tail end of the train appeared with a red light and the guard standing in the open doorway with the flags in his hands. In the inter-class Janana compartment was Lakshmi, fair and fat, on whose nose the diamond nose ring glistened against the station lights. Her mouth was bloated with the beetle saliva which she had been storing up to the spit as soon as the train had cleared the station. As the train sped past the lighted part of the platform, Lady Lal spat and sent a jet of red dribble flying across like a dart. So, this is the story of karma.